Oftentimes what we were seeing in the report were actually a lot of women who left their jobs because they felt like they were hitting the glass ceiling or struggling with the discrimination in the work environment. And they decided to be entrepreneurs. And the reason I say the just do it mindset is with every single woman I have done the research with who decided to take the leap of faith to be an entrepreneur, where it did not work out at the end of the day, they still ended up in a position afterwards in the corporate world that was significantly higher than where they were before.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Embracing Only podcast. On today's episode, I'm so excited to welcome and thrilled to introduce our guest, Janine Vanessa Heinrich, a passionate advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the realm of entrepreneurship. Janine's journey is a testament to her commitment to creating a more equitable entrepreneurial landscape. Janine's story begins with her really unique background. She's of German Ghanaian heritage and immigrated to the United States at the tender age of 3. Her diverse cultural experiences have shaped her perspectives. And in 2015, at 18, shortly after graduating from high school, Janine moved to Germany, embracing and embarking on a new chapter. Her academic achievements are remarkable. Janine graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in International Marketing Management, followed by a Master's of Science in Entrepreneurship, all out of BHU, which is a mutual alma mater that we share. These qualifications have laid a solid foundation for her to drive impactful changes in the entrepreneurial world. Janine's personal journey is equally impressive. She's been instrumental in collaborating with ADAN, Afro-German Academics Network, where she plays a pivotal part in developing Elevate and leading the creation and operations of the ADAN Elevate Accelerator. Her dedication to elevating underrepresented founders is evident in her work with Founderland and the Founderland Compass program. But that's not all. Janine is also the founder and host of On the Up and Up, a groundbreaking podcast that ignites crucial conversations within the startup ecosystem. Her podcast focuses on amplifying the voices and stories of underrepresented and underestimated, inspiring a new generation of visionaries to leap into entrepreneurship. And currently, Janine is making waves as a venture architect at Venture Lab Nitera Group, where she continues to influence and reshape the entrepreneurial landscape. Welcome to the Embracing Only podcast, Janine.
Thank you for having me. It was really interesting to listen to an intro and be on the other side of the table. It's a very surreal experience. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Because yes, Janine, you're a prolific keynote speaker, a guest on so many panel discussions and on podcasts. So I can imagine that whenever you hear your own bio recited, when you're usually the one giving the bio, it's always fascinating and be like, yes, I am pretty inspiring and I'm pretty awesome. So I hope you felt that.
Yeah, that was me. Exactly. So yeah, that was me. Okay, cool.
Exactly. So Janine, as I mentioned to the listeners, Janine and I share an alma mater with BHU, which is a university based out of Germany. And Janine just recently completed her thesis last year that won a significant prize on inclusion for this entire region. And I'll let you talk a little bit about that. But in your thesis, you explored how intersectionality influences the experiences and resources of female minority founders. How do you think intersectionality affects especially their access to funding and support?
Of course. Well, intersectionality, it's a loaded topic. It's a big topic. And I think a lot of people in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space overlook it because it is such a complex topic. Essentially, intersectionality takes it away from I am a woman who has certain challenges to becoming I'm a Black woman with challenges that differentiate from a white woman with challenges. And now when you're taking in those intersections of not only your gender, but your ethnicity, your socioeconomic level, you start to realize, okay, the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion is extremely complex. But the inspiration for this research really came from when I was dabbling with a startup idea that I was trying to get off the ground. And I would always see programs specifically for women entrepreneurs or artists of color. And I was like, okay, this is great. But when we look at the statistics, and I also think the 2023 Atomical Report also says this now too, the research is either stagnated or it's got the funding for this group of founders is either stagnated or getting worse. So then it leads to the question, what's going on? And that's when, to me, I was like, obviously the problem is more than just gender or ethnicity. it's a multifaceted issue with all of these intersectionalities coming together that are making it more challenging. And that was when I was like, okay, let me embark on this research and see what I can find out during my master's studies. And essentially, when I was doing that, it really pulled to the forefront the different archetypes of an entrepreneur, right? You, of course, have your typical white male entrepreneur, went to prestigious university, has a great network, doing really well, figured it out. And you start to realize that when you're doing this kind of research, gender definitely makes a major difference. Even the way we as women, as children, are reared into being a little bit, don't ask for certain things, try to be a little bit more humble with your request, don't be so boastful, right? And boys are told to go out there, ask for it, be more aggressive, it's fine, right? Those things already make a difference. Then we take into the factor socioeconomic level, which means maybe you didn't have the access to certain education institutions as well. Then we take in the factor of your ethnicity and the stereotypes and discrimination that come about that. All of a sudden, all of these things come together and you realize this founder with all of these intersectionalities versus another founder might have significantly different challenges in raising funding. And that was what the culmination of the research was. And that's when I took it one step further to try to understand how people negotiate these intersectionalities, the advantages and disadvantages that are coming with it to navigate the startup ecosystem. And so you started to see, for example, some women who maybe present more Caucasian or white in their appearance, but then also studied at certain institutions, maybe have a background in investment banking and consulting, have a significantly different experience getting funding or getting their place in the entrepreneur ecosystem than a woman who maybe did not have those educational backgrounds as a woman of color, or more specifically a Black woman, for example, and is coming from maybe just a normal academic institution, nothing prestigious, doesn't have access to that network already. So that was what the research was showing, and then how people trade off these different characteristics to navigate the ecosystem was also really fascinating to see. So yeah, that was how it started.
It is much needed work, because what is true in the corporate boardrooms is very true in the startup funding ecosystem as well, where I would say in the startup ecosystem, it's more they're curious to learn and they're like, oh, yes, of course, we need to have diversity. They're like, okay, do we have a woman founder? And that's what they would fly high as a flag. But just as much as we see in the corporate space, wherein the minute you have a lot of employee resource groups doing a lot of work with communities, but the minute we talk about, well, what about women and then Black women in STEM, for example, right? Like all these three, like engineering, this and this, then it's, well, don't overcomplicate it. No, it needs to be overcomplicated, because these women don't have, forget even access. They don't even know that access exists. And the same, what I'm hearing you say is what I'm from your research, and even just from starting to get engaged with the startup ecosystem myself, is what I see consistently with just the ideas that are pitched, with them not clicking with investors because they're usually white men sitting in a boardroom or a room listening to these ideas. And there was this really interesting LinkedIn post I saw a couple of weeks ago where this female investor was in Spain, and she mentioned that she was listening to pitches from female like a few different founders. The men who had no viable product identified yet, like no product market fit, had actually no revenues either, were asking for close to a few $1 million. And the women who had 5 years of being in market, I think 300,000 or something plus in profit year after year, were asking for $250,000, which is dramatically different, right? So this is where I have a question. You talk a lot about how the pitches need to really stand out for women and especially female entrepreneurs. And you did an episode with Christopher Solich. He mentioned delving into crafting a captivating pitch. And what advice would you give female entrepreneurs of color to make their pitches stand out, especially considering the biases the minute they walk into that investment community and are ready to talk about what they have to share with the world?
It's good that you refer back to that episode, because one thing that I think Christoph said that was maybe an eye-opener to me was, I was like, how do you pitch to an audience that doesn't understand your problem? And I remember when I was trying to do that, I had seen it a bit as a disadvantage, and even felt like I had to I had to tell the story. You should always tell the story behind it. Just in general, emotions always make people want to buy or feel more for have a better understanding. But he also had said something along the lines of, the beautiful thing about having an audience that doesn't necessarily understand your product is that you're the expert and they can't tell you, oh no, that's not true. So that's a nice thing about it. At the same time, as women, I think a major part of it is coming in with this strong energy of I am the expert. And really coming in and making sure that you're not framing things along the lines of, oh, I don't know. It's okay to say you don't know, but these are my steps to figure it out. And this was also the thing that I found. I forgot which episode I was talking to with it, but it could become a 15-step process instead of a 2-step process for you to get to the end goal of your startup, right? But you as a founder, your job is not to say I have all the answers. Your job is to say, this is what I'm trying to get to, and this is how I'm going to get there. And then you have the numbers, the stats, and the figures to say, these are the people who have this problem, and this is how I can create a profitable business. At the same time, I've sometimes seen with women entrepreneurs, especially those who maybe are working on a niche product or a particular segment, we might be going for the wrong fundraising at that particular time. For me at that time, I think I was doing the wrong thing by going for VC funding for a business that was not going to scale at the multiples of a VC case. And I oftentimes think that people don't fully understand the funding mechanisms behind a startup and what exactly that means for your business. So I would have to say there's a major part of education where sometimes for people coming from a background that didn't necessarily have access to it, you wouldn't understand necessarily. You would feel like, oh, the investors are being biased, which they are. There are certain times they are being very biased, but there's also other times where you just don't have a business that's that case. But if you do have a business that is the case, then it's simply a matter of showing these are my steps to get there. This is how I'm going to do it, and have the facts, the numbers. And so you do a little bit of ethos, pathos, and logos in your speech, right? And the last thing that I would also say is from my research, what I saw was that there's a very strong difference between promotion-focused questions versus prevention-focused questions. And these are questions that your investors would typically ask you. And oftentimes women are asked questions around prevention-focused. So how do you plan on making sure that your competitors don't take advantage of your business? And then you go into a way of answering your question where it's a bit more defensive, or, well, if this happens, then I would try to do X, Y, Z, right? But it doesn't put you in a position of strength or power. You're basically talking about it from a position of your business getting circumvented by a competitor. Versus typically men would be asked questions where they're more promotion focused questions. What is your plan to take the market in the next 5 years? Well, over the next 5 years, I plan on doing X, Y, Z to get there. You see how the different nature of the questions give you a different nature of your response. So as a woman, you're also now learning certain tricks to how you're going to answer a question. When you're hit with a prevention focused question, try to answer with a promotion focused answer instead. And so it is these little tips and tricks because the biases are there and you're going to be hit with these questions. So now it's a matter of also training yourself, which I know is not necessarily what you want to hear, that you should be learning certain tricks to avoid bias, but at the same time, the bias is there right now. So there are ways to try to mitigate it as much as possible. And I would also say that in addition to the confidence and having the numbers and the facts and the emotions behind it.
Yeah.
That was a long answer.
The reality is, yes, bias exists. And one of our key focuses with our community at the Embracing Only podcast is how do you thrive in spite of it all? Otherwise, you're just surviving when you're just like, I'm not going to engage here, or this is crazy. You got to thrive in spite all of this. And I love your prompt around if you are given a prevention focused question, moving it to a promotion focused answer puts you into that position of power. And that's also true outside of the startup ecosystem. At work, you're presenting a strat plan, you're presenting a project plan. Because the minute you get into defense, there is no coming out stronger to showcase that I know what I am doing. I am the expert that you mentioned. And I love that reframe that Christoph shared, right? That especially when you're focused on a new topic, you are the expert. So no one can question your expertise. But let's unpack that a little bit, because sure, no one can question your expertise. But I hear a lot of the following, which is I was sitting at a digital demo day in Dusseldorf. And I heard there were a couple of female founders talking about menopause. And there was an app that one of them had created to get home safely. Right? I'm forgetting the name. It was like a ride app, but safety numbers, based out of Berlin, actually. And there were men in the audience who were actually some investors, and they were not asking the question from the perspective of, wow, this woman's an expert and she knows where she's taking a business. But instead, they were asking questions to unpack menopause. So do you see like a lot of women that are like women of color in these situations wherein they're spending their time explaining the concept of why this thing is even important, and versus the audience recognizing that, hey, they are the expert. So let's move forward from this space to look at it as a business opportunity. And they're not here to teach you about menopause.
Find balance between the two, I would say. Because on one hand, when you have an audience, especially an audience that you need something from, who needs to understand it to be able to give you something. Now, for me, it becomes a question of, are they asking to understand so that they're more inclined to help, or are they just asking to question your expertise on the topic? And my thing is, storytelling is so key in your pitch, right? You don't have that much time to pitch. So when you're pitching, try to tell the story. And I think Christoph said this really well, and I've tried this myself. Try to tell the story from a perspective that your audience would understand. Maybe it's their wife. Maybe it's their daughter. Maybe it's a parallel illness that a man may face that has similar symptoms. But try to tell it from a perspective of that so they can empathize with the problem more and truly understand how debilitating that can be. Whether you break that down into numbers, saying on average, women are missing XYZ amount of hours at work because of the impacts of this, whatever it is. And then you say that's essentially the same amount as 4 days out of office per month. I don't know. Something along those lines, right? But really breaking it down to an emotional level, but then also being able to quantify it. Now, at the same time, you can't win everybody. And this is where I always say you need to lean into your power and you need to lean into your position of strength. You are the expert, and don't allow yourself to be pushed down by someone who does not understand the topic. And this is also why it's a great filter for you to figure out who you do and you don't want to work with. Because if this person is constantly questioning your expertise and is not fully trusting you, you don't want that person as an investor. Stop trying to win them over. There comes to a point where you have to be a bit arrogant and you're just like, I'm not entertaining this anymore. And it's a great way for you to filter through who you really want to work with and who is better left on the sideline. Because anyway, your investor is basically like a partner for marriage. You're stuck with them. And if they already suck from the beginning, they're going to get worse during that period of time that you're building your company. So if you can already filter that out from the very beginning, leave them to the side. Because there's also investors who invest in companies who have absolutely no idea what the company does, but love the founder. You want people who believe in you as a founder, someone who's going to really encourage you. They may not necessarily understand what you're building, but they trust you. So that's why I really say it's a fine balance between the two of understanding where the questioning is coming from. But at the same time, you want people who are your champions. Your investors should be your champions. They should be the ones to help you open your next doors, get you to that next level. They're not the ones building the company for you. You're doing that. They need to trust that you can do it and that you're the expert. And so that's why I always keep saying you really need to stand in your power, because it's your company at the day. It's your vision. Lean into that. Filter out the naysayers and the others. We don't need them.
Yes, 100%. And this is applicable across the board. I'm thinking about my own journey as a solopreneur now with the clients I choose to work with. And then or my time in corporate as well. It's the mentors we choose to tap to be like, hey, will you champion for me? Sometimes we're trying to win over people that are not worth our time and effort winning over because they don't see your brilliance. They don't see what impact you can drive. And here we're investing energy upon energy in trying to convince somebody that is never going to get it. So move on and find your right community that will really help move you forward.
And maybe just to quickly jump into what you've just said there, because you said we still have to thrive despite everything that's going on. And that's why I say this too, because this is a hard lesson that I've been learning as I'm still relatively young in my career getting there. If you put your energy into all of this, you can't thrive despite. You're exhausted all the time. And I felt that for myself where my fire is burning. I'm tired. I'm feeling unmotivated. I was really miserable. And then I really started to realize I need to put this into perspective. And it's like choosing my battles now. This person may not be worth it. And I don't have the energy to give to this person. And I will not give them the energy. That's just that. I need it for this because my goals and everything that's lined up, I need to continue. And there's certain things I need to reach, I need to get there. I need to have the energy for that. So I'm trying to thrive in spite and I don't want to burn out in the process. So
Yes,
I try to differentiate.
and I love that about the Gen Z is that so much earlier in your career, you're just like, I have nothing to prove to anybody by burning myself out because I'm very much millennial and very much geriatric millennial, as I call myself. And for millennials, what's fascinating is that we were in an environment because we came from like our parents' environment, but it was like, I don't think they even asked these questions. We started asking ourselves these questions, but we were out on a mission, or we are out on a mission to constantly prove that we can do this, we can do that. And there's this crazy survival bias that steeps in, right? Because we're like, oh, I made it through this hell. I keep going through this because I'm going to prove to people. You're proving nothing to nobody when you are burning yourself out. So you really need to take a step back to be like, if I am not truly, what does thriving look like for me? First of all, define what that is. Then if I'm not truly thriving in this environment that I've chosen to step into or create for myself or whatever, what needs to change to make it happen? Because nobody is winning a medal or a prize or anything or getting even claps of the hand because you chose to stay in a toxic workplace, you chose to work with a toxic boss, you chose to go after the same VCs that are not interested in listening to you. None of that matters, right? So this is where community plays such a significant role. And so for the onlys in this space that you continuously see and you help navigate, how can they help create that sense of community to help them recognize those moments where they're merely surviving, but they can, by changing a couple of things, they can truly thrive?
That's a really good question. And I think it's a very individual experience. I can only talk about it from my personal experience. And as a kid, I was always the only, right? I always joked that I was a mixed fit. German, Ghanaian, grew up in the US, wasn't black enough for the black kids, definitely wasn't white for the white kids. Could pass for Hispanic, but couldn't speak Spanish, so didn't fit with them either, right? So I was always the outcast in school. And even though I went to a school with a graduating class of 1,000 people, I always joked that my friends and I were the friends that were left over from all the cliques that didn't fit into those cliques. And I think I spent a lot of time as a kid wanting to be a part of something, right? Even though I played sports, I didn't necessarily completely fit in with the jockeyer kind of kids on my lacrosse team. So I remember always trying to get in there. And I think a part of it to start to get to that place is a journey of looking inward first. And for me, this is something that I'm still working on every day, right? Because of course it's easy for me to fall back into things. I have moments when I'm seeing what's happening in the startup ecosystem, like, oh, why am I not a part of that? Why I should try to go be more active in this space. But I'm like, I don't have the energy right now for that either. And I have to give myself the grace. And so looking back, when I looked inward, I started thinking to myself, okay, what was it? Is it because you're not going out enough? I'm like, well, that's not my natural personality. I'm naturally more introverted. I'm not the one who's going to go out of my way to meet people. Fine. But I am better at creating one-on-one dialogues and better in smaller groups. So I'm going to lean more into environments where I can do those kinds of things instead. And maybe I didn't necessarily get along with those people, but why didn't I get along with them? Okay, for me, I found some of them a bit energy draining to be around. I'm naturally prefer to be in a more quiet environment. Some people are just louder and more boisterous. It was a lot for me. I just have to respect that doesn't work for me. And so it's those kind of little things of understanding myself first that made it easier for me to then understand how I can plug myself into the environment around me. And so to this day, you probably are not going to see me so often at a huge networking event because I just don't like it. It's not fun for me. I find it draining. I find it exhausting. And I often find myself feeling out of place. I am like, I never know how to walk up to someone and just start a conversation. That doesn't work. But you might find me at a more intimate setting where it's going to be a dinner setup and a few people, and that's where it works. And then in that, I'm able to create more of a community of people that I can connect with easier. And so that's why I keep saying it really starts within, with understanding yourself. For me, I had to hit rock bottom as well in that process, because growing up, always feeling out of place, there gets to a point where you're like, am I ever going to feel like I'm included? But then you start to realize there's society's idea of what that should look like. But that's not necessarily my idea of what that should look like. It's the same thing, like you just said, with what is thriving, right? For me and you, thriving is two different things. And so I have to understand that my thriving looks one way, and I want to feel like XYZ in that environment. And that's how I'm going to get there, because that fits me, which may not necessarily fit you. That was the process for me in finding that. And I've had to give myself the grace and accept some things are just not for me. I'll probably never enjoy it, and that's okay.
Gosh, you're making me think really hard, especially when you went back to childhood. Gosh, like now you're like really making me like, I'm literally making a mental note that I'm going to do some writing, just to think through that part, because it's so true. A lot of and I'm of course not a psychologist. I am not a historian. I'm not any of whatever those things are that you need to get into. But what's fascinating is that a lot of how we choose to show up in the world as adults, of course, is formed in our formative years, right? As little kids. And we move through it. We show up and become adults, and we suddenly need to start adulting. And we're like, what the heck is this? But we lose sight of, okay, what is it rooted in, right? What are our insecurities rooted in? What are our own biases about ourselves rooted in? Our limiting beliefs of ourselves rooted in? And that inward journey is such an important prompt for everyone, like to really take that time to go inwards, to be like, well, why do I not enjoy these spaces? Because a lot of times we blame the spaces. But the reality is that we're choosing to put ourselves in these places. And for sure, if you're working in a large corporate environment, we think that success in our lives is continuing to work in those large corporate environments. But we lose sight of the fact that we always have a choice. Because you are brilliant, you are capable, someone else will hire you. And I understand the economic environment is horrendous. I understand people on visas. It is even at that intersection of being an immigrant on a visa, it's even harder. I've been there, done that. But are there opportunities in different spaces wherein you can truly thrive, can be, my gosh, can be empowering in so many ways. And really, it can give you freedom to like breathe, because you're not, again, and I cannot even imagine what it's like as you are navigating entrepreneurship, because it's a lot of times what is you're in these large events, like you've got to be in these large events, you've got to wheel and deal, shake hands and kiss babies, right? As you're talking to all these investors, and it can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a back foot every single time if I don't engage. And so I want to talk about something you mentioned on an episode you did with Jonas Ngonia. I hope I said that right, on your podcast, where you spoke about this mindset of overcoming those systemic barriers that you had identified in the Rise and Thrive report with this just do it mindset. And you said, especially for women of color. So maybe unpack that for me, because while, yes, we can do it, how do we do it in a way in which it protects us and our ability to thrive?
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Cream. If you are a corporate girly and you are struggling, you're feeling stuck, maybe you're feeling underpaid, overqualified, you're struggling with your boss, or bigger yet, you're even trying to clearly articulate what it is that you want from your corporate career, I am the coach for you. So if you're ambitious and you've got goals to accomplish and you want to accomplish them quickly, check out my website, oliviacream.com. I would love to help you reach your goals.
Hi, everybody. I'm Archita Fritz, your other host of the Embracing Only podcast. If you're ready to leave corporate, or you've changed a couple of corporate jobs and want to start a profitable side brilliance, you've made the decision, but you feel unsure of the next steps, here's how I can help you. I can guide you through a successful transition to entrepreneurship to help turn those ideas into profit. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit me on architafritz.com to accelerate your empowered transitions. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah. Just to quickly go back a little bit to what you said as well, because when we were talking about the childhood thing, it brought to mind, because it made me remember a little bit of why I act the way I'm acting now. And maybe it's me being a bit rebellious to the environment that was around me when I was younger. I am naturally, I wouldn't say a quiet person, because I can definitely be loud when I need to be loud, but I wait until I need to do it. It really, I have to finally feel like this is the moment that I need to do it. Otherwise, I prefer to sit and observe. And I remember as a kid, I was shy though. And I even phone calls, my mom would call me and I'd be like, yeah, hello. My mom would be like, you need to be louder. You're not loud. I can't hear you. What are you saying? And then my mom eventually was like, you know what? I'm going to put her into a pageant training thing so that she learns to talk in front of people.
Dang.
And I sat there, my mom put me through modeling, pageants. I had to stand in front of large audiences, learn to speak, and all of those things. I am grateful for it because it did force me out of my comfort zone and it did teach me certain skills. And I do think you do have to lean out of your comfort zone as well. So what I'm not saying is to stay comfortable in your environment and try to create a world around just you for comfort. It's not necessarily that. But there are other things about myself where I remember as a kid, teachers told me you're too quiet to be a leader. I wanted to apply to be like in this leadership position at school and I didn't get it. And the criticism was you're too quiet. And to me, that was one of the worst things a teacher could have possibly said to me because it made it seem like I could never be in a leadership position. But the thing is, I see it in two different ways, right? My mom put me in an environment so that I could learn certain skills to thrive in it, but it did not stop me from being more of this reserved type of person. And when it comes to leadership positions now, I've never tried to be the loudest in the room. I don't feel a need to be the louder one in the room. I prefer to listen to what everyone's saying. And then when necessarily speak up when I have something of value to contribute, but talking for the sake of talking or being loud, unnecessary. And so just to lean back into what you said a little bit there, that was why I have this combination of lean into who you are as a person and make it a strength while also putting yourself out of your comfort zone by learning the certain skills to add that to your reservoir to make even your strength even more of a strength, right? And now to the other question that you had about the systemic biases. So you're going to have to give me a little bit more context around that, actually, because I'm not exactly sure which part of the report. So when I was speaking with him, you said that it was the part about the systemic inequalities that women of color are facing and then how they kind of push through that.
How you have to, you were talking about this just do it mindset. And you were talking about, well, sometimes you just have to go in and do in order to thrive. And that was what the report alluded to.
As women of color, and oftentimes, especially when you put the aspect of migration, you would have seen the struggle that your parents went through first, and then you're looking for more security. And so then you're trying to start your business while working part-time. But if you want your business to really grow to the scale that you imagine, you need to take that leap of faith and risk and just go fully in it. One of the things, and I really do believe in the just do it mindset, because to me, there's nothing that bad ever on the table. The only thing that could ever potentially be really bad for you is death. Outside of that, everything else you can figure out. And oftentimes for these women who want to be entrepreneurs or working on it, you have already a plethora of skill sets that if this thing did not work out, you can go do something else. The world is your oyster. It's just a matter of capitalizing it. And like you said, you always have a choice and you always have an option. And so oftentimes what we were seeing in the report were actually a lot of women who left their jobs because they felt like they were hitting the glass ceiling or struggling with the discrimination in the work environment. And they decided to be entrepreneurs. And the reason I say the just do it mindset is with every single woman I have done the research with who decided to take the leap of faith to be an entrepreneur, where it did not work out at the end of the day, they still ended up in a position afterwards in the corporate world that was significantly higher than where they were before. A position that maybe would have taken them 15 to 20 years to get to, they managed to circumvent that time in a matter of 3 to 5 years because they left the corporate world to go focus on their venture. The skill sets and everything that they learned were invaluable. And I have not heard any single founder who did that and said, this was the worst choice I made. It set me back career-wise. It never has set them back. And so that's why the just do it mindset is really key, because the learnings and the value, it's a calculated risk you're taking. It's not just a stupid risk. At the end of the day, it's going to set you up, take you further. And the worst thing that happens is it doesn't work out and you move back. And even for those founders who struggled during that time, financially, personally, and everything as a founder, they still thought the journey and the experience was super valuable. So just do it. You're going to learn.
Yes. I think it's the learning, right? Because my husband, I think there's a quote as well, but my husband lives by this, and it says, if you don't win, you learn. And that is true for everything we do. And there's something about the corporate environment where we're indoctrinated into believing, even though you might say and hear a million different things, that if you don't win, you're failing. And so people constantly live around being like, it's not about learning, it's about failing, because me not achieving this or us not achieving this goal for the organization means we're not good leaders, we didn't deliver on this, etc. And sometimes, especially for those women who step into entrepreneurship after corporate environments, that's one of the biggest things to unlearn. Failing is constant learning, because you're absolutely right. Like, you build this arsenal of skill sets that you would not ever get in the corporate environment, because it's honestly an opportunity to I say fail forward consistently through it. And if we are lucky when we are with leaders in corporate environments that help create this entrepreneurial like mindset, even in these large corporate environments that give us a chance to do that. But for the most part, that does not exist. And so, that would make a lot of sense with regards to, well, just do it. But you mentioned something about earlier, right? Know that you need a certain kind of environment to thrive, but also know that putting yourself in environments that make you feel discomfort helps you learn equally. And that discomfort sometimes is it is moving against every molecule of your body. And so as long as it doesn't compromise your values, as long as it doesn't compromise your mental health, etc., stay within that discomfort because you'll come out that much stronger.
Exactly. And the thing that I would also add to that is exactly to your point about your values, it should also align with what you would consider a failure. And I had this moment for myself where, because I had this dream, I was like, I'll be Forbes 30 under 30. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then the one day I was talking to a friend and I kept hearing about how they regret certain things in the past, how their parents regret this, and everyone's regretting that, regretting. And I was like, oh, what a terrible way to live your life. that you're always thinking back about your past and you're feeling regret about it. And I started to think to myself, okay, Janine, you're 26 now. You get to this point in your life when you're 40, 50. Are you going to regret your life because you did not manage to achieve those things that you expected, these more material status things? Will you feel this regret? And at the time I was like, currently with the way my mind is set, yeah, I will sit there and I will not feel satisfied with my life. I don't want to be 50, 60 years old and thinking to myself, oh, you didn't achieve it. So then it became a question of, okay, well, what would be a failure to me? What do I really want? And taking that down to an intrinsic level in my values. And I was like, well, I want to connect people. I want to learn. I want to feel like, of course, I want to be financially comfortable and that's important for me. But I don't have to be stupid rich. Yeah. And I say that with the utmost respect, but I don't need to be insanely rich. I just need to be comfortable for myself. And that would be satisfying. And then shifting my mindset to stop seeing failure as you didn't achieve XYZ status or XYZ position or XYZ house or this or that, and becoming more, I have failed myself when I have not lived up to the values that I set myself. And everything else outside of that is not failure. I've only failed myself when I have not lived to the integrity and the values that I have set. That's it. Anything else in the process, we're just going with it.
I love what you said, right? What would you consider a failure? I wish I did that discovery when I was 26, because I think I came to that probably when I was in my early 30s, when I call it an incident, but it's not an incident, but I was pregnant with my third child. Like, it was not an incident, but I happened to just reflect at that point. And I was just like, I had all of these milestones of what success looked like. I was very clear on what success looked like. It's also an interesting thing because now I'm not in my early 30s, of course, but now as I reflect on things, I wonder if you would say failure look like, or I don't know, I don't look at things as failures anymore, which is also a bizarrely very different perspective, because I would look at it more as, okay, what would it look like if I were to not achieve this, I guess? It would probably how would that make me feel? And would I be comfortable with that feeling? And if it is not, then I'm going to give it my 800%, because I literally have let go of this whole idea of failing, because I was raised in an environment where I had to be like 95 plus in all my grades that I got. I had to do this. I had to do that. Everything had to be a had to. Otherwise, I was considered a failure. But I've recognized, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, that none of that is failure. Again, there's moments of learning, right? So I'm guessing going into that journey, again, it goes to your inward journey. Like, how do you go into the inward journey and define for yourself, if I've set all of these goals, are these goals that I want to achieve because it brings me the value that I seek for my life? Or are these the goals that the community says is what makes you successful? And if you can disconnect from that, it can be truly liberating.
It can. It's a constant ongoing journey, right? Like I said, 26 years old. I think a great example that put life into perspective like this for me was my dad's passing. He had Parkinson's disease. he worked and always said when he retired, he's going to do XYZ. And then he retired and he had Parkinson's and he couldn't do what he wanted to do. And then he was regretting and hating and everything because he focused so much on working and reaching these external goals that were probably more societally driven or driven by a family than was really for him. And so having that example for myself was what put me there. And I hit a pretty good breaking point too myself. I'm pretty open about it, where for about 2 years, I always said I struggled with a pretty strong depression. Like I always say, I felt like somebody turned the lights off on me. And honestly, it was only last year, May, where someone turned the light back on and the world literally seemed like a brighter place to me. And so I am very cognizant of what can I do to avoid going back into that place again. And so it really became me constantly working every single day on, is this something that I'm having fun doing? Is this something that I feel fulfilled from doing? Is this a fun thing? And the moment I start to feel like this is not it, and consistently keep feeling that this doesn't fit for me, that's where I have to say, respect my body and what myself is telling me and say, okay, what do I need to do to get myself to a place where that's joyful for me? And that's pretty much the main way that I'm going through that. That might mean something else for someone else. But for me, the moment something doesn't seem like fun anymore, I'm not doing it. And maybe that's a very Gen Z mentality, like you said, right? It could be very much the case. I will not force myself to do something that I don't like.
Yeah, but it's not. So people diss that mentality, but I applaud it because you're protecting your peace. Jeez. Like you're protecting every part of you that needs protection. Now, the reality is that can seem to some as being flippant. Ugh, this wasn't fun anymore, so they've checked out. But the reality is that if it's not bringing you the value you seek in your life, why keep doing something for the sake of doing it? Now, there's a difference between discomfort and fun, right? So things can be freaking uncomfortable for a very long period of time, and it might not feel like a lot of fun, but is it getting you towards what you define as this is the success and this is like not what it would look like? And if it is, you sometimes have to stay in the thick of the discomfort to get through the other side. And usually this is where community, coaches, and others come into play to help you through this, because it's not always going to be fun and rainbows and unicorns. And we all recognize this. What are your thriving mechanisms in those moments to help get you across that bridge of discomfort?
Yeah. Well, I mean, getting comfortable with the discomfort, right? So that's also where I says, like, when I'm not having fun, that means this thing is genuinely a problem for me. But if it's just a bit uncomfortable at the time and that's not fun, that's fine, because there's also that dopamine you're going to get once you make it through, right? You're like, yes, I achieved it. So there's a strong aspect of perseverance that I don't want to seem like, oh, we don't like this, just like you said, being flippant. For me, really, I think your body tells you a lot. So if you just give yourself the quiet time to respect it. So one of the things is I feel like I'm always busy, especially the lessons graduating uni. I was always doing this, doing that. Every evening there's plans, there's work, there's this, there's that. And I never have the time to sit and listen to my body say how it's feeling. And so one of the ways that I help myself thrive in this environment is like, I try to do at least half the day on Sunday just for myself. Then I sit and I feel, how am I feeling this week? Do I need this week to be a bit of a calmer one because the last ones were a bit tough? I might need to do that. For example, I said the month of October was insane for me. I had the 2 podcast recordings. I had major deliverables for work. It was so exhausting that by the time I hit that final meeting to one of the top bosses, I call him tier 4 boss. By the time I got to tier 4 boss and finished that meeting, I could literally feel the cortisone leaving my body and everything just started to hurt really badly. And I think as a woman also, I have to be very cognizant of the fact that my hormonal levels, what's going on during that period of time also really affects this. And so when I felt that, I was like, okay, for the next week, we're taking it easy. Maybe I'll try yoga. I tried yoga for the first time. I didn't make any social plans after. And it's really taking that time to listen to myself is what helps me a lot. And I had to learn that through therapy, where she was like, you're just ignoring your needs. And you know what your needs are. Your body knows what your needs are. And I used to always say, yeah, but I don't feel like I'm in tune with my body. Then fine, become in tune with your body. Take the time to listen to it. And it'll tell you, your neck will be hurting and you start realizing, oh, it was a really stressful week. I need to just maybe reduce the workload this week. And that's okay too. So that's the main way that I do it, is just really having that time for myself. Because like I said, I know I'm naturally an introvert. My energy comes from when I have a little bit more of a quiet time, a little bit more isolation time to breathe and think. And so in those times is where I can really hear my body say, this is what we're going to need right now. And giving myself grace, because like I said, I know what I need to do, but sometimes I don't do it. October, like I said, crazy month. I didn't do that at all. I ran like a headless chicken until I basically almost fell apart at the end of the month, and then was like, okay, I'll take a break now. But maybe I'll throw the question back to you. How is that for you?
Yeah. How is that for me with regards to listening to my body? Yeah. So I would say that I've been very deliberate in how I am writing the script of my life right now. And so I literally wrote down pen and paper, what do I want my week to look like? What do I want my day to look like? And then how am I going to go find opportunities to make me live that week and day? So to me, getting so clear on what that means ensures that when I look at a week and I reflect on it, for instance, and I see that I violated every aspect of what I said I wanted it to look like, I literally take a step back. That could mean that it affects income because I'm my own businesswoman right now. But it's weirdly enough, for someone who was so tuned into like security, you spoke about how we saw our parents struggle. And so for us, security is so critical now that even then it's okay. I feel okay because I have listened to what I defined as what my week needs to look like. And of course, as I said, I do violate that every one of those rules from time to time. But knowing what that looks like makes me come back to recalibrating my week, my day, my whatever to manage it, right? And so with what you mentioned, it's actually a great place to wrap us up to as well. I love what you said with regards to listen to your body. And I will add, know that you have choices. So when you are listening to your body, which we don't do enough of at all, unless, you meditate, unless you like take that time to sit with yourself, and then you recognize that you have choices, those choices will guide you to listen to your body, right? So that's how I'd like bring us home here. Listeners, we are over our usual 45 minute like timeline, but I feel like I have 8 more questions that I could unpack with Janine over here. But you've been so sage in your advice, Janine, that you have shared with all of our listeners here. And what would you leave them with regards to protecting their peace to thrive as they get ready for 2024? Especially as women and women of color.
I would just say give yourself grace. Honestly, just be kind to yourself. And I think that's one of the things that we have the hardest time doing, because oftentimes we're coming from a background where you're always having to prove yourself, always having to be the best, always having to be, if everyone's at 100, you want to be at 150%. But from time to time, maybe you only have 50% for yourself that day. And that is your 100% for that day. And that's okay. And it's okay if you planned out your week to look a certain way. Every week I tell myself I will wake up at 7 a.m. and every week I have failed so far. But it's a matter of putting in certain mechanisms where now I'm trying smaller things. I just try maybe a little bit every day, 15 minutes going to bed a little bit earlier. And if I make it that 15 minutes earlier, I'm happy. Maybe I still won't wake up at 7. But I had that little win. And giving yourself those little wins and giving yourself grace and just taking the time to listen to yourself. And it's okay to disappoint other people if it means that you yourself are going to feel okay. Sometimes it's okay to say no, disappoint them. It's fine because it's for your peace.
I love that. Yes.
And that's all I would say.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you on here. I'll leave you all with, go on your inward journey, listen to your body, know that you can make your own choices, especially the choice to say no. So with that, thank you so much, Janine. I really appreciate having you on the Embracing Only podcast. And can you just share really quickly with our listeners where they can find you if they want to reach out to you?
Of course. Thank you for having me. This was such a fun experience. So if you want to listen to some of my podcast episodes, feel free to check out ontheupupandup.io on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. Or follow me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at janine@ontheupupandup.io. And thank you again for having me. Really was a pleasure.
Same with Janine. Thank you so much.